There is a moon in our solar system, not on the edge of the galaxy, not in some distant star system, right here, orbiting Jupiter, just 500 million miles away. And beneath its frozen, cracked surface lies an ocean, a real liquid ocean, one that scientists believe has been sitting there in the dark billions of years. The question NASA is now asking isn't simply whether that ocean exists. They already know it does. The question is, what's living in it? For most of human history, the idea that life could exist anywhere beyond Earth was dismissed as pure science fiction, a fantasy reserved for movies and novels. But that assumption has slowly, methodically been dismantled by science. And right now, one of the most exciting chapters of that story is unfolding around a small, ice-covered moon called Europa. Europa is one of Jupiter's 95 known moons, roughly the size of our own moon. From a distance, it looks almost peaceful, a smooth, pale sphere marked by long, reddish-brown streaks, as if something beneath the surface tried to break free. And in a way, something did. Over the past few decades, the evidence has grown stronger and stronger. Data from spacecraft flybys, magnetic field measurements, surface imaging, all pointing to the same conclusion. Europa almost certainly hides a vast, global saltwater ocean beneath its frozen crust. An ocean that may contain twice as much liquid water as all of Earth's oceans combined. Think about that for twice as much water. And where there is liquid water, where there is warmth, where there is chemical energy, life, at least as we understand it, has a fighting chance. That possibility changes everything, which is why NASA is going. In 2024, the agency launched Europa Clipper, the largest spacecraft ever built for a planetary mission. Its destination, Jupiter's moon, Europa. Its mission, to determine whether that hidden ocean could support life. Not to find little green creatures, not to drill through the ice, but to answer a deeper question. Are the ingredients for life truly there? But why Europa? Out of hundreds of moons, why focus on this one frozen world? What makes scientists believe that beneath miles of solid ice, there could be something stirring? And just how realistic is the idea that something microbial, alien, unseen, might actually be alive down there right now? That is exactly what we are going to explore today. To understand why scientists are so excited about Europa, you first have to understand what makes it so unusual. Europa was discovered in 1610 by the Italian astronomer Galileo Galilei. On the very same night, he identified 3 other massive moons orbiting Jupiter: Io, Ganymede, and Callisto. Together, these 4 became known as the Galilean moons, and they remain some of the most fascinating objects in our solar system. But even among them, Europa stands apart. If you were to look at Europa through a telescope, the first thing you would notice is how smooth it is, unnaturally smooth. Europa has almost no large craters on its surface, and that is extraordinary. Every other rocky or icy world in the outer solar system is battered, scarred, and permanently marked by impacts. Our moon? Covered in craters. Mars? Covered in craters. Even Callisto, Jupiter's outermost large moon, is one of the most heavily cratered objects we've ever observed. But Europa? Almost nothing. And that is a massive clue. In planetary science, craters are like timestamps. The more craters you see, the older the surface is. So when a world has very few craters, it means the surface is young, geologically speaking. Something is constantly renewing it, erasing the scars, resetting the clock. On Earth, that resurfacing happens through plate tectonics, volcanism, erosion, and weather. But Europa has no thick atmosphere. No rain, no wind. It sits in the deep freeze of the outer solar system, where temperatures plunge to hundreds of degrees below zero. So what could possibly be reshaping its surface? The answer appears to be far more dramatic. The ice is moving, shifting, cracking, grinding against itself. And in some places, it may even be melting and refreezing from below. Because beneath that frozen shell, which could be miles thick, lies something extraordinary. A vast global ocean, liquid, dark, and kept warm by powerful forces deep inside the moon. The reddish-brown streaks that stretch across Europa's surface, known as lineae, are enormous fractures in the ice. Scientists believe these cracks can split open, allowing material from the ocean below to rise upward before freezing solid once again. The reddish color? It may be salts. It may be minerals. It may even include complex organic compounds, altered by Jupiter's intense radiation. Now pause for a moment and really think about that. Europa's surface may literally be painted with material that came from an ocean hidden miles. Now, you might be wondering, how do we actually know there's an ocean under that ice? We've never drilled through Europa's crust. We've never landed a submarine there. We've never seen this ocean directly. So how confident can scientists really be? The answer is extremely confident. And that confidence comes from multiple independent lines of evidence, which is exactly what scientists look for. When different clues point to the same conclusion, that's when things get serious. The first major clue came from NASA's Galileo spacecraft, which orbited Jupiter from 1995 to 2003. As Galileo flew past Europa again and again and again, it measured something strange in the moon's magnetic field. The readings weren't stable. They shifted. They fluctuated. And the pattern of those changes suggested something remarkable. Beneath Europa's icy shell, there appeared to be a conductive layer. In other words, something capable of carrying electricity. Now here's the key detail. Ice is a poor electrical conductor. But salt water? Salt water conducts electricity very well. The simplest explanation, and the one that fits the data best, is a vast, salty ocean hidden beneath the surface. That was clue number one. Clue number two comes from gravity, and not just any gravity, Jupiter's gravity. Jupiter is so massive that it outweighs all the other planets in our solar system combined. Its gravitational pull is not gentle, it is relentless. As Europa orbits this giant planet, it doesn't travel in a perfectly smooth circle. Its orbit is slightly elliptical, which means the distance between Europa and Jupiter constantly changes, and that difference creates something called tidal flexing. Europa is literally squeezed and stretched over and over again. Its surface rises and falls by tens of meters during each orbit. Imagine a world that is continuously kneaded like dough by the largest planet in the solar system. That process generates heat deep inside the moon. We already see the extreme version of this effect on Io, the innermost of the Galilean moons. Io is the most volcanically active body in the entire solar system, covered in erupting lava lakes and massive plumes, because Jupiter's gravity is crushing and stretching it so violently that its interior is essentially a global magma engine. Europa sits slightly farther away. The tidal stress is less intense, but still powerful. Scientists believe that the heat produced by this constant flexing is more than enough to keep an ocean liquid beneath the ice, even at such a vast distance from the sun. Then came the third clue, and perhaps the most dramatic of all. In 2012, the Hubble Space Telescope captured images that stunned researchers. What appeared to be towering plumes of water vapor erupting from Europa's south pole, geysers, jets of material blasting into space, possibly reaching heights of over 100 miles. NASA saw similar evidence again in 2016. If these plumes are confirmed and the evidence continues to grow, it means Europa is not just hiding an ocean. It may be actively venting material from that ocean into space. And this is the part that makes astrobiologists genuinely excited. Because if those plumes are real, a spacecraft wouldn't need to drill through miles of ice. It could simply fly through the plume, collect particles, analyze the chemistry. The ocean itself might be sending samples directly to us. For the first time in history, we may not have to break into an alien ocean. It might already be reaching out. When astrobiologists, the scientists who study the potential for life beyond Earth, evaluate a world, they use a surprisingly simple framework. Life, at least as we understand it, requires 3 essential ingredients: liquid water, a source of chemical energy, and the right chemistry, specifically organic molecules, the carbon-based building blocks of biology. So let's walk through those 3 requirements, one by one, for Europa. First, liquid water. Check. At this point, the evidence is overwhelming. Europa almost certainly harbors a global ocean beneath its icy crust. An ocean that may be anywhere from 60 to 100 miles deep. To put that into perspective, the deepest point in Earth's oceans, the Mariana Trench, is about 7 miles deep. Europa's ocean could be more than 10 times deeper than that. In fact, it may contain more liquid water than every ocean, lake, and river on Earth combined. That alone makes Europa extraordinary. But water by itself isn't enough. Life also needs energy. And this is where things become truly fascinating. On Earth, most ecosystems ultimately depend on sunlight. Plants convert sunlight into energy through photosynthesis. Animals eat plants. Predators eat other animals. The entire chain begins with the sun. But Europa's ocean is sealed beneath miles of solid ice. No sunlight penetrates that darkness. So how could anything possibly survive there? The answer may lie deep on the ocean floor. Here's the part that surprises many people. Scientists believe Europa's seafloor could host hydrothermal vents, very similar to those found in Earth's own oceans. On our planet, hydrothermal vents form where seawater seeps into cracks in the crust, gets superheated by magma below, and then blasts back out, rich in minerals and chemical energy. Around these vents, in total darkness, miles beneath the surface, entire ecosystems flourish. Giant tube worms, crabs, shrimp, thousands of species of microbes. None of them rely on sunlight. Instead, they use a process called chemosynthesis, converting chemical energy from the vents into biological energy. Life, powered by chemistry, not light. Now imagine a similar environment on Europa. Tidal forces from Jupiter generate internal heat. That heat may keep parts of the rocky interior warm enough to drive hydrothermal activity on the seafloor. If that's happening, then Europa's ocean wouldn't be cold and stagnant. It could be chemically active, dynamic, energetic. In other words, potentially habitable. And that brings us to the third ingredient, the right chemistry. Europa's ocean is believed to be salty, possibly similar in composition to Earth's oceans. The reddish material streaking across its surface may contain sulfur compounds, and perhaps even organic molecules. There is also evidence of hydrogen peroxide and other oxidants on the surface, created by Jupiter's intense radiation. If those chemicals are transported downward into the ocean through cracks in the ice, they could provide yet another source of chemical energy, a potential energy cycle, an interaction between surface chemistry and ocean chemistry. When you step back and look at the full picture, something remarkable emerges. Liquid water? Very likely. Chemical energy? Strongly possible. Organic chemistry? Increasingly plausible. All 3 boxes, at least partially, are checked. And that is why Europa sits near the very top of NASA's priority list in the search for life within our solar system. Because if life can exist there, hidden beneath miles of ice, powered by chemistry instead of sunlight, then life in the universe may be far more common than we ever imagined. So, how do you investigate an ocean buried beneath miles of ice on a moon nearly 500 million miles away? Very carefully, and with one of the most sophisticated planetary spacecraft ever built. Europa Clipper launched on October 14, 2024, aboard a SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Now, think about the scale of this journey. It won't even arrive at Jupiter until 2030. 6 years, traveling across the vast emptiness of space, just to reach its target. That's how far away Jupiter is. And when Europa Clipper finally gets there, the real work begins. Here's something that surprises a lot of people. Europa Clipper will not orbit Europa. Instead, it will orbit Jupiter and perform approximately 49 close flybys of the Moon during its primary mission. Each flyby will last only a few hours. But during those brief windows, the spacecraft will swoop down to altitudes as low as 16 miles above the surface. 16 miles. Close enough to directly sample the Moon's environment. So why not simply place the spacecraft into orbit around Europa? Because Europa sits deep within Jupiter's radiation belts. Jupiter's magnetic field is enormous, and it traps charged particles, accelerating them to extreme energies. The radiation near Europa is intense, brutal, powerful enough to damage electronics, powerful enough to shred biological molecules, powerful enough to scramble DNA at the surface. If Europa Clipper tried to orbit the Moon continuously, it would be exposed to that radiation without pause. Its systems would degrade rapidly. The mission could be cut short. The flyby strategy is a clever solution. Dart in, collect data, get out. Spend most of the time in slightly safer regions of Jupiter's orbit, then dive back in for another close pass. Precision, timing, survival. And the spacecraft itself is extraordinary. Its solar arrays stretch nearly 100 feet from tip to tip, about the wingspan of a commercial airliner. Why so large? Because at Jupiter's distance from the Sun, sunlight is roughly 25 times weaker than it is on Earth. To generate enough power, the spacecraft needs enormous panels. On board are 9 sophisticated science instruments, an ice-penetrating radar that can peer through the crust, mapping the thickness of the ice and searching for hidden pockets of water, a magnetometer that can measure subtle changes in magnetic fields, helping scientists determine the ocean's depth, saltiness, and conductivity, a thermal imager to detect warm regions where the ice may be thinner or recently active, and a mass spectrometer capable of analyzing particles in Europa's thin atmosphere and in any plumes it might encounter. Each instrument is like a different sense. Together, they create a layered, 3-dimensional picture of this hidden world. And if those water vapor plumes erupt during the mission, Europa Clipper may fly directly through them, collecting microscopic particles, measuring their chemistry, searching for complex molecules. In a sense, it could be tasting the ocean from space. Let's pause here for just a moment and think about what's really at stake. For decades, humanity has searched for life beyond Earth. We've listened for radio signals from distant stars. We've sent rovers crawling across the surface of Mars, scanning for biosignatures in ancient rocks. We've analyzed meteorites, hunting for traces of organic chemistry. So far, nothing conclusive. Hints, possibilities, but no definitive proof. Europa is different. Europa isn't a distant exoplanet hundreds of light years away. It isn't a faint signal buried in cosmic noise. It is a moon in our own solar system, with a vast, warm, salty ocean that may have existed for billions of years. And that changes the equation. Because if life exists on Europa, even microbial life, even the simplest single-celled organisms, the implications would be staggering. Here's the logic. If life arose independently on two separate worlds in the same solar system, Earth and Europa, then life is not a miracle. It is not a 1 in a trillion cosmic accident. It is a natural process. Something that happens wherever the conditions are right. Now, zoom out. There are hundreds of billions of galaxies in the observable universe. Each galaxy contains hundreds of billions of stars. Around many of those stars, planets. Around some of those planets, moons. Worlds beyond counting. If life can emerge twice in one solar system, then statistically, it is almost certainly everywhere. The late astronomer Carl Sagan once said that the universe is a pretty big place, and if it's just us, it seems like an awful waste of space. Europa may be where we begin to test that idea, but there's another possibility, one that's discussed less often, and it may be even more profound. Imagine we find life on Europa, and imagine that its chemistry is completely unrelated to life on Earth. Different genetic structure, different biochemistry, a separate origin. That would mean life began twice, independently, within the same solar system. Two separate genesis events. If that were confirmed, it would arguably be the most important scientific discovery in human history. It would tell us that life is not fragile and rare. It is resilient, inevitable. And even if Europa Clipper flies past the moon 49 times, collecting data, analyzing plumes, mapping the ocean, and finds no evidence of life at all, that result would still matter immensely. Because science advances not only by discovering what is there, but by understanding what is not. A negative result would help define the boundaries of habitability. It would clarify exactly what conditions life requires and which ones are not enough. Either outcome changes our understanding of the universe. Either outcome moves humanity forward. And that is why Europa is not just another moon. It is a question mark, hanging in the darkness, waiting for us to answer it. Before we wrap up, there's one more piece of the Europa puzzle, one that rarely makes headlines, but that many scientists consider deeply compelling. At first glance, Europa's ocean sounds bleak. Pitch black, sealed beneath miles of ice, cut off from sunlight. And yes, it is dark down there. No sunlight penetrates that frozen shell. But remember those powerful radiation belts surrounding Jupiter? Jupiter constantly bombards Europa's surface with high-energy charged particles. On the surface, that sounds like bad news. Radiation is destructive. It shatters molecules. It damages biology. But chemistry doesn't see it that way. When those high-energy particles slam into Europa's icy surface, they break apart water molecules and other compounds. In the process, they create new substances, including oxygen, hydrogen peroxide, and other oxidants. This radiation-driven chemistry is called radiolysis, and here's where it gets extraordinary. Europa's ice shell is not static. It isn't a frozen, lifeless slab. Scientists believe it slowly churns over time through a process called convection. Warm ice rises, cold ice sinks, like a lava lamp, but made of frozen water. Over thousands, even millions of years, surface material can be transported downward, which means those radiation-produced oxidants, created at the surface, could eventually be delivered into the ocean below. Now think about what that means. If oxidants like oxygen are coming down from above, and reduced chemicals, such as hydrogen and minerals, are being supplied from hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor below, you create a chemical gradient, a difference in chemical potential between two environments. And on Earth, that exact kind of gradient is what powers metabolism. It's what allows cells to extract energy. It's what drives life. In other words, the intense radiation that makes Europa seem hostile and deadly on the outside may actually be helping fuel the chemistry of life on the inside. The danger at the surface could be feeding the ocean beneath. That kind of elegant, counterintuitive twist is what makes planetary science so endlessly fascinating. Because sometimes the very forces that appear destructive turn out to be the ones that make life possible.
Europa Clipper is on its way, right now, gliding through the darkness between Earth and Jupiter at nearly 52,000 miles per hour. Silent, precise, relentless. It will arrive in 2030, and then, over the years that follow, it will perform 49 carefully planned flybys, sweeping past Europa again and again, building a detailed map of that hidden ocean, hunting for plumes, measuring magnetic fields, searching for chemical fingerprints that could hint at life. Each pass, another layer of the mystery peeled back. If everything goes according to plan, by the mid-2000s and 30s, we will have the most complete picture ever assembled of Europa's habitability. And if those results are promising, if the ocean appears chemically rich, thermally active, and truly capable of supporting life, then the next step is already waiting in the wings. A lander, not just a spacecraft flying past, not just remote sensing, but a machine that would touch the surface, drill into the ice, and attempt to directly sample material from another world's ocean. This is not science fiction. The technology is being developed. The engineering challenges are being studied. The scientific case is being strengthened. The funding debates are happening. Humanity is methodically working toward a moment that, just a century ago, would have sounded impossible. Reaching into an alien ocean and asking a simple question, is anyone home? And Europa is not alone in this story. Saturn's moon, Enceladus, sprays plumes of ocean water into space. Titan holds lakes and rivers of liquid methane. Ganymede and Callisto may hide oceans of their own. The solar system we now know is far more water-rich than anyone imagined just 100 years ago. But Europa remains the gold standard. The evidence is strongest. The ocean appears most Earth-like. The mission is already underway. We are living at an extraordinary moment in human history. For the first time, the question of whether life exists beyond Earth is no longer just philosophy, no longer just science fiction. It is an active scientific investigation. There is hardware in space. There are teams of scientists working every single day. There is data on the way. And there is a very real possibility that within our lifetimes, perhaps within the next 2 decades, we will finally have an answer. The universe is vast, ancient, overflowing with mystery. But sometimes, the greatest mysteries are not across the galaxy. Sometimes they are in our own cosmic backyard, buried beneath miles of ice on a small, pale moon, waiting patiently in the dark. And we are about to find out what's down there. If you found this fascinating and